name's Deb Meyer, and I know that my volume goes in and out, so please bear with me if that happens in the short time that I'm speaking tonight. We are doing some troubleshooting on that. My role at Trinity United Methodist Church is Director of Servant Ministries, and it's my great joy to work with our Housing for All Allyship with Jan Silverstein and Pam Hubbard and Joan Mayberry. And we have a group of folks that have been working for a little over a year on education and advocacy in the progress of attaining housing for all in Denver. And so we started these 40-minute calls earlier this year as a way of checking in on the advocacy work that we're doing and to learn tips for greater impact in our advocacy work and to keep moving forward together in action. And so we usually start out with having people share what kind of advocacy that they've been doing since we last met. We've all been working on the same advocacy. And so I'm going to report some really exciting developments that have happened that we've been part of. Before I turn it over to Jan Silverstein, who will introduce us to our special guest tonight, Jennifer Bice, who's with Denver's Department of Housing. And we're really looking forward to hearing from Jennifer and taking our action steps from what she has to share with us tonight. So how many of you have worked on advocacy for tiny house villages? Yes, yes, yes. So the second tiny house village opened last week in Clara Brown Commons, which is a housing development that is being led by Mile High Ministries, the nonprofit. And the tiny house village is part of Colorado Village Collaborative, and it's a women's village. And 14 women who were formerly homeless now have a home through Clara Brown Commons Village. So we're definitely celebrating that. And I got to participate. I think some of you also were on the call last week. There was a dedication of those facilities and also a great and interesting report from someone at DU who gave us the findings of a report that they've been doing on the first tiny house village under Colorado Village Collaborative called Beloved Community. The second thing that I have for us to celebrate is safe outdoor spaces. How many of you have advocated for safe outdoor spaces? I think everybody has. Hi, Diana. Thanks for popping in. And Cheryl, I see you now that we started. We're just welcoming, and we're gonna get into our speaker very briefly. So this week, the first safe outdoor space opened at First Baptist Church across the street from the Capitol building. And the second one will be opening later this month at Denver Community Church. And those are incredible. I think the first one at First Baptist Church is housing around 35 women and transgendered individuals. And so we're very happy that that has gone through. As you know, it was a lot of work of advocacy for those. And then the DCC location will be opening later this month. Our work together has been on education and advocacy, but it's really important that both of these safe outdoor spaces be successful so that we can have the opportunity to do more of those if the need remains. And so in our follow-up email to tonight, I'm going to send you ways that we can be involved volunteering at safe outdoor spaces. If that's something that you or groups that you're involved with would please explore and consider for involvement. And then the third way that we've been involved in advocacy since we last talked was giving our feedback to the action plan, the draft action plan for 2021. And we celebrated last time the passage of 2B that would be funding housing for our homeless neighbors. And we discussed the plan and we came up with feedback. And that's the topic of our meeting tonight, because if you've noticed, there have been some updates made to that plan based on the feedback that was received. And now we have a new plan to give feedback on. And so Jan was wonderful to reach out and get our speaker for tonight, Jennifer Bice. And so I'll turn it over to Jan now to introduce Jennifer and the rest of our time together. Thank you all for joining us and for your involvement in this urgent work.
And Deb, thank you for getting all of that in. Can you just do that one feature though, the tents and how they are made? That really got me. Yeah.
I know. So I happen to be on the board for Colorado Village Collaborative. And so we were celebrating on Monday night at our board meeting the approval for the safe outdoor spaces that are opening up. And I learned a little more of the details. And those tents are special tents that are used by ice fishermen and fisherwomen, I would say. And they have this special base that I think it must plug in, and it maintains a 70-degree temperature. So, we're all concerned about people who are living outside during the winter. And so that helps a lot to have a special tent for their shelter.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you for being a part of this tonight. And I am very happy to introduce our featured speaker. And Jennifer Bice, I will do just a bit of her bio, and it really fits what we're going to be doing tonight. She is the Policy and Strategic Initiatives Manager for the Denver Department of Housing Stability. And in that role, she supports the department's work in strategic planning, policy, and data and reporting. And she is ideally suited to tell us what she's going to tell us tonight. She began her career working for the Urban Institute, a nonprofit research organization in DC, where she evaluated housing and homelessness programs, conducted housing needs and assessments, and researched policy and programmatic approaches. And then just before she joined HOST, Jennifer was the Homeless Service System Manager for Boulder County, bringing together city, county, and profit partners and other stakeholders to organize the county's response to homelessness for single individuals. So with all of that, Jennifer, thanks so much for joining us this evening, and we look forward to your updates on the HOST planning. And we're so glad that you will be talking about this feedback that we gave earlier. And we're anxious to hear how this is all going to connect to something we've celebrated in 2B. And then just expect you to tell us what to do, because we're all about action. So thank you.
Absolutely. So first off, just to echo the thank yous, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here with you all tonight. Sorry, my brain is a little bit slow this evening. Really great to be here with you all, and really great to hear all of the work and the commitment that you guys have brought to this community. Homelessness and housing are so foundational to everything in our lives, right? Even more especially in COVID, when we need to stay safer at home and stay at home for our unhoused neighbors. That wasn't an option. So really appreciate all of the work that you do. And I'm really glad to be here to talk a little bit about the draft action plan and the updates that we're making to incorporate this really exciting new resource that's passed by 2B. So I have a couple slides, mostly just to help keep myself organized, but some of them do have some links and stuff that you may already have, you may not, but I did send a PDF in case you wanted to click through to any of those. So let me just there we go. So wanted to start, as Jan said, with the action plan. So first off, thank you so much for providing feedback. As you know, we had the draft plan posted and we had a survey for folks to give us their feedback. I think we had over 100 community responses, which was wonderful. And so really glad to get that input. In general, it was really positive, a lot of support for the plan, which was great to see. And then a lot of really thoughtful feedback about other things to consider. So we are in the process of really taking all of that feedback in and updating that document that you all have already reviewed and provided input on. That should be posted to our website by the end of this month. If you want to check out the final version, I will also like forecast some of the changes that are coming for you all here today, because some of them really do relate to the feedback that you provided. But just wanted to let you know to be on the lookout for that on our host website in the next couple weeks. So yeah, just to kind of get into the feedback that you all provided. I know one kind of big theme was around regional approaches. And it's a really great point, because people aren't bound to any particular county, right? They will travel as meets their needs, as do we all. And so as we think about how we approach things regionally and how we support folks in that, one thing that HOST does is really try to connect with Metro Denver Homeless Initiative that operates at that kind of 7-county Metro Denver level, and participate in the processes that they're leading. I know MDHI is also really trying to work with some of our partner counties that maybe don't have as many services locally, to really help them build that capacity. So as you all rightly pointed out, people can be served in the communities that they're from and get that support from their neighbors. So we do really try to partner with MDHI. I think kind of building out what that regional piece looks like is also a good focus for our 5-year plan, which we'll be working on in 2021 and really refining some of these bigger picture strategies. But also just wanted to let you all know one exciting thing that we're doing as a region. So for the past several years, Metro Denver Homeless Initiative and our Metro region has been part of an effort that's called Built for Zero, which aims to drive toward what's called functional zero for veteran and chronic homelessness. So essentially, it's a little bit of a wonky math calculation, but essentially we're housing people very quickly if we're in functional zero, and we have more housing available than we have people who are experiencing homelessness. So if you fall into that housing crisis, we're able to get you back into housing really quickly. And so there's some new energy around that effort this year with the support of the Kaiser Permanente. And we have a whole statewide Colorado Built for Zero effort. And Metro Denver is really breaking out into sub-regional groups to really focus locally. It's really excited to see what energy that brings to each of the counties in the region, and Denver is definitely having our portion of that as well. So I think be on the lookout for more of that in our 5-year planning process, but definitely engaging with MDHI and continuing those partnerships is always a priority. In terms of focusing on the 30% AMI and below units, that's definitely critical. I think there's the kind of data section of the plan, and there's one chart that I like a lot because I think it really shows the importance of this particular piece, which is that 84% of households in Denver who have incomes at 30% AMI and below are paying more for their housing than they can afford, which is a staggering statistic. And so with that in mind, Housing and Inclusive Denver, which is still kind of very much part of our 2021 strategy, focuses a large portion of those funds. That's our local funding stream to develop affordable units, focuses on 30% AMI and below rental, and also housing for people experiencing homelessness. So kind of two big focuses there of those Housing and Inclusive Denver goals, recognizing that importance. So that carries forward with 2021 in the action plan. In terms of really building out how we're talking about equity and advancing equity and centering racial disparities, it was really, I was really glad to see that feedback from you all. That's something that we've been continuing to work on between the first draft and the second draft, really working on our impact framework and how we better center that and how we really elevate that throughout the entire plan. So I'm hopeful that when you take a read through the final, you'll see that feedback reflected and responded to. And then 3-year shelter strategy, also super critical. One of the big tenets of the 3-year shelter strategy is moving toward 24/7 shelter that functions to support people in rehousing. It's kind of, there's a lot of detail in that plan, but that's kind of the bedrock, if you will. And that is definitely a priority for 2021. And it's also a focus of 2B, which we'll get to in a minute. And then lastly, for data systems and reporting, completely agree. We really, over this next year, want to work to really build out the information that's available for host in our public dashboards. So I did link here to our affordable housing dashboard that's out right now. It's got a ton of great info. You guys have probably already looked at it in terms of like how many units we're building and where and all of that good stuff. But a big goal, a central goal for host for 2021 is how do we build out that public reporting so that it reflects the work of the new department across the entire continuum. That dashboard was started to really demonstrate the progress that was made under Housing and Inclusive Denver for the Affordable Housing Fund. But now we have all of these new resources and all of these new supports coming together in the Department of Housing Stability, and we want that external reporting to reflect it. Certainly part of that is making sure the internal reporting works too, but hopefully you all will start to see more information put out through our website with more data, where our fund's going, those types of things. There's also a little bit of language about that in the draft 2B plan. Any questions on that before I transition into 2B? So then, yeah, just digging in a bit on 2B. Oh, Jan, were you gonna?
Yeah, I was just going to say, folks, if in fact you are wondering how you're going to do the questions, certainly you can unmute yourself, but you can also put the questions in the chat room if you'd like, and we'll pay attention to that.
Thank you. Yes, good note. So yeah, just to transition into 2B, obviously you all have been very involved, but just to recap briefly, creates a 0.25% sales tax that establishes the Homelessness Resolution Fund. We're projecting that it will generate $37 million in 2021 and hopefully closer to 40 million under stronger economic conditions. However, exact amounts will depend on actual sales tax collection. The fund is exclusively to be used to support people experiencing homelessness or exiting homelessness. And host is charged as the manager of that fund with having a final plan for how 2021 dollars will be used by the end of January. And that is the process we're in right now. Before we get into some of those specifics, just so you all know, we have the survey out, which we'll talk about in a minute. We're also trying to meet with community groups. So I was really glad to be invited here today, as well as meeting with residents with lived experience, other stakeholders, service providers, supportive housing developers, all sorts of folks related to the work to make sure we have robust input. So per ordinance that referred to be to the ballot, we can use the funds to support capital, operations, maintenance, and services for affordable housing development, rental assistance, and supportive services, expanding shelter beds and supporting 24/7 shelter. So that kind of 3-year shelter strategy vision, and then really any other supports that really drive that connection for folks to those housing resources. We also, as host is thinking about the plan, we really want to be responsive to what the campaign told Denver voters they were voting for. So the campaign estimated that the fund would build 1,800 homes with supportive services over the next 10 years, create 500 to 600 units of either shelter or housing in catalytic projects. So if you're familiar with projects like Arroyo Village, the Dolores Project, that's a site that combines shelter, permanent supportive housing, and workforce housing all at the same location. So think projects like that. We also want to regrow our lost shelter capacity that was impacted by COVID and expand supportive services for folks to improve their well-being, improve their ability to kind of connect with those free housing supports. Now to the good stuff. What are we actually proposing in terms of this plan? So this chart just gives you a quick snapshot. My next slide has some details in terms of what does this mean in terms of outcomes? What are these categories? How are they defined? But just to show, I think one central piece of this 2021 use of 2B that's probably unique is this fairly large portion for COVID response. We expect that we will continue to respond to and recover from COVID and the economic impacts of COVID over the 2021 year. However, we do have federal funding streams that the city can tap to support some of those efforts. We are hopeful that we will not need this entire amount, but to be conservative and make sure we can have a really planful transition, from some of the supplemental sites that Host has, and its partners have stood up to make sure we can provide people safe options during this time. We wanted to make sure we had resource available. But that is probably not an ongoing need. And if less money than this 10 million or 27% is needed, it will get reallocated to other areas to make sure we're putting that money into the community. The largest chunk of funds is planned right now in the draft plan to go to housing and support services. So things like rental assistance, support services to keep people housed. A significant portion is also planned right now to go to shelter and services. So that would go to support 24/7 shelter, other services that folks might need. And then smaller portions in some of these other areas, which include about $1 million for innovative approaches for the things we haven't thought of yet or haven't tried yet that might be really promising approaches. And I think you all spoke of some at the top of the meeting. The second section is on catalytic development. So that's those kind of Arroyo Village-like projects that are combining multiple uses at each site. And then about $2 million for administration. Host is allowed to take up to 8% to administer the fund to make sure we have staff who are able to do the contracts, pay the invoices, support on reporting, support our program partners. So we're not proposing to take the whole percent or 8%. We really want to put that money out in the community, but do plan to hold a portion of that so we can really administer the fund appropriately. And then lastly, we do have a small amount slated this year for reserves, about $1 million or 3%. That's really to kind of buffer us against any unforeseen needs. And also in the event that actual sales tax collection ends up being a little lower than the projection, given some of our economic uncertainty these days, that just gives us a little bit of room to weather those if it happens. And certainly if we don't end up needing that reserve for something unexpected, it rolls over until the next year, or it rolls over year to year, so we could put it out into the community in the next year. So this just kind of gives you the extra detail in terms of outcomes. And so for COVID, an emergency response, we'd be looking to support the successful transition out of about 800 hotel rooms where we're currently offering folks safe isolation spaces. People that are 65 and older, who have underlying health conditions or who are COVID positive that really can't safely shelter in a congregate setting. Wanting to make sure we're connecting people to housing as much as we can from those rooms and making sure that that transition is smooth. For housing, exactly what these numbers look like will depend on, of course, the exact services that we procure for. But we estimate that this amount's about $11 million could support rehousing at least 500 households next year alone, which is really exciting. For shelter and supportive services, we are estimating that the funding can support more than 430 beds in that 24/7 model and deepening supportive services to really support that rehousing mission at an additional 700 beds. And in the catalytic space, hoping to create at least 100 units of either shelter or housing through those catalytic approaches. Looks like we got a couple questions in the chat, so I'll just take a look at those. All right, so a question from Mary about how will Denver funds be allocated around the metro area? So I think exactly what we procure for, will depend on the outcomes of procurement. I think in general, Host funds partners that operate in the city and county of Denver. So I think we would likely seek to focus in that way because they're local funds, but that we will specify those parameters in any additional procurement that we issue. And then how would the passage of national COVID relief for rental assistance or a national moratorium impact Denver's budget and focus? Yeah, so it's a great question. Certainly there's a little bit up in the air with transition at the federal level. And not quite yet knowing what the Senate outcome will be, which could potentially impact what types of stimulus bills get passed and things of that nature. think in this draft plan, we're proposing that these are approximate and these are our projections. If something were to dramatically change, I think we would kind of look at that legislation as it comes. We do certainly, in terms of rental assistance, there are also folks that are currently in their housing, but maybe are behind on rent, but are still in due to, eviction moratoria, things of that nature. So there could also be other uses of federal funds to help keep folks in their homes that they're already into. So I think we would just have to look at what does the federal government make available? Where do we see kind of the biggest need across the continuum at that point? But it's a really great question. We try to be nimble these days because it seems like every day is different. And then, oh, great. So yeah, just to close on actions to take, please also complete the survey on this 2B addendum. We really want to hear from as many community members as we can. And so I've linked here, when you all get the PDF of the slides, to the draft addendum, both the English version and the Spanish version. And then I've also linked to both the English and the Spanish survey. And when I say the addendum, that's just what we're calling this 2B plan. It will end up being in an appendix or an addendum to the action plan. But it's just that five-page plan you've probably seen. The second, it sounds like it's right in line with your mission, is just really to help us get the word out. The city pushes things out through our newsletter and our social media, but hearing things from your neighbors and people that is definitely the most impactful strategy. So please help us get the word out. And then if you aren't already, please sign up for the newsletter. That's just our best way to keep everybody who's interested in Host informed about what we're doing. And so I did put a little screenshot here of how, what that part of the website looks like. If you click this denvergov.org/housing, then you'll get all of our updates for other public engagement opportunities, any sort of things that are going on. So that's a great one too. All right, and then lastly, just discussion. Happy to hear from you, any feedback, any other questions you have. And thanks again for letting me chat with you guys tonight.
Well, thank you so much, Jennifer. What do you think? Can we get back to having our, come on, I can do this, the screen so that we can all see one another?
Yep.
Excellent. So, all of you people who've been involved in giving feedback and in hearing about this feedback and then wanting to know what you can do next. What are your thoughts? Take yourself off of mute and let's talk about this.
This is Paula. Jennifer, did you say there's a new host plan out there that the public can read?
Yeah, so the new plan is just it's a short 5-page plan that just specifies how we would spend those 2B dollars this next year.
Okay.
And that's what's called the addendum.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, correct.
So 2021 Action Plan Addendum, Investment Framework for the Homelessness Resolution Fund. And we have access to that.
Yep, and I can put those links in.
And you'll re-emphasize that, Deb, in the email you're going to send out. Excellent. Yep. But that final page that you gave us for just how we're going to be sure we're all signed up, is everybody already signed up for the newsletter? If you aren't, that's the way to do it. So Paula, what did you hear from Jennifer in terms of some powerful information you provided for us about being sure that we stay connected to the 3-year shelter study?
That we stay connected to that? Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess one of the things that I picked up on in the three-year plan was the need for coordination of all the activities that are going on and the millions of dollars that are being spent, that the host people at the top, I know you want to get community feedback, but you are the experts and you should be making the decisions based on information that you get, because donors have their own pet projects. And it's my opinion that it's up to you as the government to figure out what the best use of the money is, rather than and it takes I think a huge data connection program. So I'm interested in, the fact that that enough money be spent on that to make sure that you have a powerful data program. So those are the two concerns I have.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I think one of the other kind of big promises of 2B is that we invest in what works. And in homelessness, we actually know a lot about what works. So it's a pretty well-studied area. And we know that support for permanent housing with the support services that people need to maintain that housing is that recipe for success. And then we have other things that we need to do to make sure people are supported while we scale those resources for sure. But yeah, we are definitely always trying to stay on top of those best practices. And that's a big focus. In terms of data systems, we really seek to leverage HMIS, or Homeless Management Information Systems. It's our statewide data system for homeless service providers. And it's a really powerful platform because all providers can use it. And so we can see what's going on at the community level rather than trying to kind of piece it together from reports that we get from different agencies. And so HOST has been really pushing the use of that system in our contracts, and that commitment remains going forward. We're very invested in that system, and also making sure that we can get the data out of it that really help us understand the needs and help us tell that story.
Yeah, good. Spend more money there. That's what I would say.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Paula. Okay, so are all of us hearing that in fact Jennifer would like us to be part of the network of getting the information out to others about the plan, about the direction that you're going, and about you being very open to the feedback? That's part of it? What do you think, group? Can you see us doing that? And then are there other actions that you're thinking about that we might be doing? Bonita.
I have two questions. One is, what's the easiest access to the plan that I can share with people? And secondly, how do you come to this position? I like to know what it is that brought you to this commitment and your level of involvement in this, so that I feel like when I know that, I can lend credibility to you and the process.
So yes, I will put the links to the English and the Spanish, the direct links in the chat, and then they'll be in the PowerPoint that you get after, just to that, like, how do I get people there so they can read it question. And Bonita, just to make sure I understood your second question, are you talking about kind of working in housing and homelessness more generally, or my role specific to this 2B plan, or a mix of both?
Well, yeah, your sort of background and what brings you to this, what's your commitment? I mean, I think that through Trinity, there's a level of faith commitment to this, and seeing the bigger picture. And I'm just wondering what it is that brought you to this work and your commitment long term.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate that question. So a little bit of background about me. When I was in my teens and early 20s, my first job was at an apartment complex in my small suburban town outside of Chicago. It's really tiny. It's like 2,500 people. And this one apartment complex was 75% of the residents of my town lived in this one apartment complex because it was tiny and the apartment complex was really big. So I worked there and I had an office gig, answering phones, customer service, one summer while I was in college. And I would answer the phones and people would call and they would say, I have a housing choice voucher, or I have Section 8. Can I rent here? And I would have to ask my boss, the property manager, what is the answer to that question? And it was a flat out no. And, I just reflected on that and I was just like, why does a property manager get to decide if a family gets to live in a neighborhood with a good school? That seems like something's not working right. And so simultaneously, I was getting my bachelor's in sociology and political science and really tried to learn more about housing policy, and also got really interested in research and the ability of data to really help us understand these questions. And so then kind of out of undergrad, worked at the Urban Institute, where I really learned that homelessness is a solvable problem. About 1% of people experience homelessness in the United States in a year, which is not that, it's too many people, but it's solvable. And we know a lot about what works, as I said. And so really wanted to bring that lens as I spent a couple years doing that work in DC and kind of working with communities on evaluations. I really wanted to bring that lens to my community that I lived in. And so went back, got my master's degree in public policy, and then have been really trying to transition my career to working in local government in Denver now, in Boulder right before. So I've been working in housing and homelessness for, I guess, about 10 to 12 years now, depending on if you count working in an office at a property management company. But really spent my whole career doing that, intend to spend the rest of it doing that. And I'm really grateful to be able to be on the team at Host to help us kind of think about these plans, think about the big picture, and then work with all of my wonderful colleagues to put the nuts and bolts in motion and support our community partners.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm thinking, everybody look at your watches. We have a meeting that happens from 7 to 7:40, don't we? So, Deb, I'm going to give you about 2 sentences to close, and then we're going to have the lovely opportunity to have Pam Hubbard pray us out tonight.
May I ask one very quick question? How do we find this how affordable housing dashboard that you referenced, that it
Good
sounds
point.
like I should know how to find it?
I'm on mute. So if you go to www.denvergov.org/housing, there's a big button that says affordable housing data. And the link will be in the PDF that you get.
DenverGov/housing.
Yes, and that's it.
Just
Just type
get
it.
excited about that. Is that an exciting thing we're going to see?
Yeah, it's definitely, there's a ton of information in there. So you can definitely spend a lot of time.
Good. Very
Say
good.
the whole thing again, please. You kind of rattled it off fast.
www.denvergov.org/housing. And I can also put it in the chat.
No, that's okay. Got it.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thanks so much.
Yes. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for being with us tonight and for addressing so clearly the feedback that we provided to the host plan. That is really helpful for us to be able to know the focus that you have taken and to be encouraged in the things that are important to us. Not everybody who's involved with this is part of Trinity. This is a broader community group, but we definitely come to our work in Housing for All through a faith lens, because we believe that everybody is created in God's image, and we want to be part of creating thriving communities for everyone. So thank you all for being part of this conversation tonight, and we will pass along the PowerPoint. And Jennifer, do you recall? In my mind, I'm thinking it's December the 21st that we want the survey in. Do you remember?
Yes,
That's it.
December
Okay.
the 21st, like a couple
All right.
weeks.
Good.
So we'll all be working on that. And when I send out the follow-up email to this with the PowerPoint, Jan and Pam and Joan and I will all be on it. And if you have any feedback or questions that you would like to coordinate with the group, we certainly can work on that together as we work on our responses to that survey. We are just so excited that there is this work in place for this year-long plan. It's so important that we have that strategy in place with the longer term focus on creating and maintaining housing. And so we appreciate the work that you're doing as well as the department that you're part of. So I will turn it over to Pam now. And again, thank you all for participating. And Pam, if you would close us out in prayer, please.
You bet. The prayer for this evening is based on a short conversation that Deb and Jan and I had as we were planning this meeting. Dear God, as we near Christmas, some of us are setting up a creche, a little model of the stable where Jesus was born, surrounded by Joseph and Mary, farm animals, shepherds, wise men, angels. The scene is familiar to us because we see it every year. But this year we find ourselves gazing a bit deeper. God, we are so aware that you could have chosen for Jesus to be born into any human family, into any station of life. But you chose Joseph and Mary, ordinary working folks from an obscure village who at the time of Jesus' birth found themselves without shelter. We can imagine what it was like with Mary being so near to giving birth and Joseph so desperate to find a safe place for the child entrusted to him. The villagers so busy with their own concerns. But finally, one harassed innkeeper points to a barn. It's not meant for human habitation, but it will have to do. Oh God, our thoughts spin to our own unhoused neighbors. The similarities with Jesus' birth are hard to miss. But can it be that you really do understand from lived experience what it is like to live on the margin of society? We look again at the little group in the barn and we dare to think so. And it makes us so grateful. And God, we thank you for inviting us to join you in your concern for those who find it hard to meet their needs. Thank you for the many who are working to offer housing alternatives. We know that shelters and tiny home villages and safe outdoor spaces, as great as they are not enough. But for now, they will have to do. But we trust you to lead us on to truly do better. And thank you for Housing for All Allyship, a way for us to join others in clearing the way a bit at a time for housing that is affordable for all. And most of all, God, thank you that we can count on you to give us the perseverance that we need along the way. In the name of Jesus, amen.
Thank you, Pam. That was beautiful.
Thanks again, Jennifer. Thank you all.
Yes,
Good night.
thank you, Jennifer.
Thanks, Jennifer.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
So
Deb.
good to see you all. See you later.